This is the first of 6 ethics training modules for Texas educators. Module 1 will focus on teacher and student personal boundaries. Every good training has a direct purpose. Today, our purpose is to become familiar with ethical behavior and expectations for all Texas educators. More importantly, the purpose of this training is to create an awareness of teacher and student boundaries that should never be crossed. As we prepare to begin our training session, this is the overarching essential question that we will conceptualize today. Respond to yourself to this essential question while you wait for the training session to begin. Take notes if you'd like. Participants will develop an understanding of proper and improper educator-student relationships and the life-changing impact they have on a student, discuss strategies to avoid a boundary violation, know and understand educator-student boundaries, and identify acceptable and unacceptable behaviors when developing a relationship with a student. Our training objectives will be directly tied to our training assessment. Today, we will help you determine what constitutes professional boundaries between a teacher and a student, and understand the consequences of those boundary violations. We will also discuss how to develop positive relationships and professionally connecting with your students. What is happening in the area of educator-student boundaries? If you read the news or watch TV, you may have seen some of these headlines. It's a disturbing trend that is at its highest level ever, nationwide. These are crimes being committed against our students in record numbers. Some of the headlines for your viewing pleasure. Inappropriate teacher-student relations in Texas kept going up in 2015. Texas teacher, student seen in sex tape to appear on Dr. Phil. Teacher charged, says she fell in love with 15-year-old student. Teacher-student sex rampant in Texas. Lawmakers seek solutions. Being the top news story of the day should never be for this reason. This former Texas high school teacher was added to the most wanted list after she was caught with a 17-year-old student during a traffic stop. This is the same student with whom she previously pled guilty to having sexual relations. She was released from jail on probation in January of that year after being convicted for having sexual relations with the student. She violated probation when she was caught with the teenager soon after her jail release. A warrant was issued for her arrest, but at the time her whereabouts were unknown. So what is happening in our schools? Unfortunately, Texas has not fared well in ethical violations. There has been a 41% increase in cases in less than 6 months. As you can see, longitudinally, the number of open cases continue to rise in the state of Texas. These statistics account for all cases under investigation, including inappropriate relationship cases. Common sense should prevail, but the absence of reason is usually at the heart of inappropriate relationships. If only it was as easy as that, and if only everyone was known for having common sense. As Voltaire says, common sense is not so common. So what is happening in our profession? Why are we seeing more cases each year? Just think about that for a minute. Now let's watch a video that addresses educator-student boundaries.
When a parent, student, community member, or other stakeholder enters a campus, it is reasonable for them to expect that students are here to learn and teachers are here to teach. It is also reasonable for anyone to be assured that student safety is a priority. Unfortunately, in the state of Texas, we are experiencing significant ethical violations where teachers cross personal boundaries with students, often leading to the loss of teaching certificates, criminal convictions, and most importantly, students being hurt. Some boundaries are crossed intentionally and overtly, while other boundaries are crossed unknowingly and without premeditation. It is important to build professional relationships that foster academic success with our students. However, there are guidelines that should be followed to ensure appropriate boundaries are in place at all times.
All right, next class. Let's get a move on. Good to see you. Miss Taylor, how are you doing today? Excellent. It is Wednesday. We're halfway through the week. Are you excited? How's it going, buddy? Good to see you. All right. Hey, almost there. How you doing today? Good to see you. All right, looks like we got one more to go. Have a good one, Miss Taylor. And that brings another great class to an end. You guys, I hope you end up learning as much in your next class as you did in this one. It was fun for me. Enjoy. Hey, hold up a second. I'd like to talk to you.
Sure, what do you need?
Well, I just wanted to let you know that you did a really great job in class today. And your reward is this. If you need any help with your assignments whatsoever, you just let me know, okay? Anytime.
Thanks, Mr. Good. I think I'm okay. Miss Taylor, can I talk to you?
Sure, what's up?
May I shut the door?
Let's leave it open, but we can move over here to talk.
Miss Taylor, I don't want to get anyone in trouble, but I'm feeling really uncomfortable about something. If I tell you, can you promise not to say anything?
I want you to feel comfortable talking to me, but you know I can't promise anything like that. Why don't you take a deep breath and tell me what's going on?
Well, every day when I come into Mr. Good's classroom, he's very touchy-feely with me. It started out sort of okay with high fives and shaking my hand, but now every day he gives me a hug or puts his hand sort of on my butt. Well, maybe more like my lower back, but feels like he's going lower and lower every day. It's getting to the point where I don't want to go to his class anymore. He's constantly giving me candy and cookies, and it's so creepy. I'm also embarrassed because some of the other students are starting to notice what he's doing. I really don't want to get him in trouble, but what should I do?
I appreciate you talking to me about this. I'm sure this must be difficult for you. Have you talked to your parents about this?
No, my mom would have a fit and make a huge scene. I really don't want to tell them.
But this is a big deal. You're going to have to talk to your parents. But first, we're going to go talk to the principal. Come on, we'll go together.
Thank you for coming in, Mr. Good. I've asked our assistant principal to sit in this meeting. Do you know why I've asked you here today?
No, I do not. What's going on?
Tell me about the types of relationships you have with your students.
Well, I'd like to think that I've got great relationships with the students. They really seem to like me. They seem to connect with me. Some more than others, of course, but all in all, I'd say I'm pretty popular with the kids.
And what are some of the strategies you use to build relationships with your students?
Well, I'd like to connect with them. I joke with them. I'll reward them. At the end of the day, I like to be more of a friend to them.
Mr. Good, we are not here to be their friend. You are their teacher. You're a professional, not an equal.
Sorry, I'm confused here. Have I done something wrong?
Well, that's yet to be determined. Tell me, would you say you honor the personal space of your students?
Oh, come on now. You guys know me. I'm just a touchy-feely kind of guy. I'm more like a teddy bear when it comes to these kids. Sure, I hug them and let them know that I care, but I would never do anything to hurt one of these kids.
Have you given gifts to any of your students?
No gifts. Maybe cookies and candies from time to time, but cookies and candies aren't gifts, right?
And it's done for the entire group or individual students?
Hey, now, if a kid does really good in class, I might reward them with a candy bar or something. I mean, come on, where's this really going?
Mr. Good, there's been a complaint concerning a violation of a student's personal space. This has caused a student to be uncomfortable around you. The student doesn't want you touching her. She indicated that you frequently hug her and give her gifts. She even said that you continuously place your hand on her lower back near her buttocks area.
Oh my goodness. Look, I know exactly which student complained. I was just trying to be nice to her. She's a sweet kid. I had no idea that my behavior was making her feel uncomfortable. Look, I hug her and I praise her from time to time, but it was never done in a bad way.
This is a very serious complaint. And it's my responsibility to not only address the situation, but to document your behavior and report the incident to central office.
What do you mean?
Ethical violations could lead to the loss of your teaching certification, as well as possible criminal prosecution. Mr. Good, do you understand the seriousness of this complaint?
Well, I do now. I wish she had said something. I would have stopped.
Sir, it's not her responsibility to tell you. Before you go, it's important for you to know that I will be providing you within 24 hours of written documentation that's going to be placed in your file. And I will notify central office of the complaint lodged against you. And at that time, a determination will be made regarding additional steps that will need to be addressed. An outside investigation could be part of your near future. This concludes the meeting.
You're too old for me, so don't put your arm around my waist. Don't act like you don't know what I'm saying, 'cause you know I'm not playing. We know your secret, your dirty little secret. It's been going on for years. It's passed down from ear to ear. It's time you got caught, and now we want you to stop. You made us feel dirty inside. It's a secret you can't deny. Please stop before it gets out of hand, 'cause it's a situation we can't stand.
As you can see, the ramifications are significant. Using good judgment and keeping current with state laws and district policies will provide a deeper understanding of the responsibility of all educators in the state of Texas. Don't become a statistic. Don't jeopardize your certification and your future. And don't find yourself involved in a criminal investigation.
The data indicate that this could be a real example of what is happening in some schools. What boundary violations were presented in this video? So how are we going to make the changes necessary to stop educators from having improper relationships with students? We can impact this disturbing trend by ensuring that all Texas educators are aware of the issues, receive training, and comply with district policies regarding ethical conduct towards students. We must maintain the dignity of the profession, respect and obey the law, demonstrate personal integrity, and exemplify honesty. Let's start with parameters as they relate to professional boundaries. In a recent study, the term professional boundaries was defined as parameters that describe the limits of a relationship where one person entrusts his or her welfare and safety to a professional, and often in circumstances where a power imbalance might exist. One of the most significant aspects of the teaching profession is the professional relationship between teachers and students. When we talk about educator-student relationships, it is important to note that the relationship is not equal. Educators are in a unique position of trust, authority, and influence with their students, which means that there is always an inherent power imbalance between teachers and students. So why is the educator-student relationship not equal? The relationship between an educator and a student could also be viewed as a power relationship. Educators have more power than imagined. Not only do they shape minds and guide learning, they also have the power to impact a student emotionally, mentally, and physically. The educator-student relationship is definitely not equal. There are different types of boundaries that we need to discuss in reference to educator-student relationships. While this is not an inclusive list, the majority of the boundary violations fall within these categories. The boundary violations include emotional, relationship violations, and communication violations. The first type of boundary violation relates to emotional aspects of the educator-student relationship. How many of you believe this statement to be true? Teachers do not have favorites in their classrooms. While this seems innocent enough, it can lead to a boundary violation where the educator-student relationship is compromised. Many students come to school with an emotional need to connect with an adult. There are two types of relationships with students, a professional relationship and a personal relationship. It is critical for educators to focus on developing a professional relationship that does not cross a personal boundary. When crossing lines emotionally with a student, you begin to slide down a slippery slope. The second type of boundary violation pertains to inappropriate relationships with students. This boundary violation is the most life-changing for all involved. Most of us have seen examples of this type of boundary violation. Some things to remember. We should take note of the consequences that follow from such action. When discussing intimate relationships with students, this includes both current and former students. Intimate behavior includes physical, emotional, or mental interactions with a student. And meeting a student alone outside of school without a valid context is seen as a relationship violation. The third type of boundary violation relates to the area of communication. In the 21st century, communication violations are extremely common due to the prevalence of technological advancements. Social media is a term we throw around frequently. But when you think about social media, what does the term mean to you? Module 2 will provide in-depth information on communication via social media. While it's important to avoid all three types of boundary violations, the focus of this module is on relationship boundary violations. Which of these boundary violations do you think occurs most commonly in our schools? And why do you think this module focuses on this boundary and not the others? Food for thought. The overwhelming majority of educators in Texas exercise their professional responsibility with care and conviction. The few who breach their duties, however, undermine the profession and leave a trail of devastation, particularly for students who become victims. As discussed earlier, it is important to note that not all cases begin with the intention to cross boundaries. Here is that slippery slope again. Sliding down that slope creates life-changing ramifications for the student and the educator. The definition of sexual misconduct includes sexual acts with a student, romantic acts with a student, erotic contact with a student, verbal, nonverbal, written, or electronic communication of romantic or sexual misconduct, and physical activity designed to establish a romantic or sexual relationship. An educator must be aware if and when a relationship shifts to serving the needs of the adult and not the needs of the student. There may be an increase in the frequency of interaction, as well as an increased level of intimacy, which may lead to a sexual relationship. The lines become blurred. The blurred lines help foster inappropriate actions and educator misconduct. On the other end of the spectrum, there are educators who intentionally seek out students and groom them for the purpose of engaging in sexual misconduct. Sexual misconduct can include any act or conduct directed toward or with a student of a romantic or sexual nature, regardless of the age of the student, including sexual acts, romantic acts, erotic contact with a student, verbal, nonverbal, written, or electronic communication of a romantic or sexual nature, or physical activity designed to establish a romantic or sexual relationship. This is the opening paragraph from a statement that a student provided the Texas Education Agency Division of Educator Investigations. When you read statements like this from a student, it goes against everything that we as educators stand for and believe. For the most part, educators are heroes and role models, not predators. The student's pain is very evident. I'm writing this letter not to stir up drama or controversy, but because I now have the confidence and courage to say that Mr. Benedict is a predator. He gains the trust of female students and slowly makes advances at them. He exploits his power and authority as a teacher to manipulate female students. Sexual grooming is a term that is associated with intentional actions that result in sexual misconduct between educators and students. It involves finding a vulnerable student and engaging in inappropriate boundary violations. The following slides provide examples of look-fors related to each phase of the grooming process. As each phase is discussed, think back to the video scenario we just watched. Phase 1 of the grooming process begins with picking a student. When predators are looking for a student to victimize, they often look for families under stress, students not close to their parents, or someone with low self-esteem or a lack of self-confidence. Predators often choose students with special needs, depressed or anxious students, or even students who have been previously victimized. They often make the student feel like they are going to save them. They become the confidant and friend to the student. Often, students who are assigned to in-school suspension are picked as possible victims. The predators often provide extra coaching and extra tutoring. They seek the trust of the family first. Phase 2 involves engaging with the student in student-like behaviors. The predator is more involved with the student than with peers. He or she hangs out with the student and engages in activities that attract younger kids, like video games or student-based interests. Phase 3 is desensitizing the student to touch. The boundaries become blurred between appropriate and inappropriate touching. There's teasing and joking around. There's accidental touching. Touch becomes a common practice and is seen as a loving and caring gesture on the part of the educator. Think back to the touching that occurred in the video scenario. Phase 4 is isolating the student. Usually there is private coaching, tutoring, and even providing transportation for school and non-school sponsored events. The student might stay overnight at the teacher's house. Sometimes the educator hires the student for babysitting, housekeeping, and yard maintenance. Many cases have involved camping or overnight trips. The last phase of grooming is when the adult makes the child feel responsible. The adult makes the student think he or she will get in trouble if anyone finds out. The adult stresses that people would not believe the student. This phase is especially effective if alcohol, drugs, or pornography is involved. We have discussed the negative impact of crossing boundaries with students. We've talked about inappropriate relationships between educators and students. So let's stop for a moment and consider the importance of this quote. No significant learning can occur without a significant relationship. We cannot and will not downplay the importance of strong relationships between students and educators. To ensure great academic success, a school system must have educators who care about and relate to their students. So how can we support our students and still remain within the ethical boundaries? It sounds easy, yet we continue to have ethical violations. As a rule of thumb, consider the 3 indicators that can help you determine if an action is an ethical violation. Is it transparent for all to see? Is it approved by my supervisor? Does it occur during the regular school day or at a school-approved activity? If so, most likely it is not an ethical violation. Educators are responsible for their behavior at all times. A student needs a ride home, so what do you do? There are so many students who need a positive educator in their life. For some, the educator will be the only role model around. Are you up for the challenge? Let's see what skills are necessary to build that supportive relationship. Educators must possess a skill set that provides the opportunity to build a supportive relationship with students. This supportive relationship will foster good attendance, good grades, and even good behavior. A few essential skills are listening, guiding, praising, correcting, respecting, honoring, disciplining, and teaching effectively. We owe that to our students and the communities we serve. It is why we chose this honorable profession. It is important to follow guidelines as specified in the district policy, but here are some good rules to follow. If you're alone with a student, the door must remain open. Also, social media exchanges include personal emails, Facebook posts, tweets, and any other form of social media interaction between you and your students. Don't have one-on-one meetings behind closed doors or personal social media exchanges. Do listen, praise, and guide your students. Don't have meetings with your students away from school, and don't exchange personal gifts. Do respect, discipline, and honor your students. Keep your hands and other body parts to yourself. Remember to refer students to the appropriate person for counseling and/or other discussions about personal matters. Maintain a professional barrier between you and your students. You are the adult, the educator, and the professional. Act like the expert at all times. Most of all, avoid putting yourself in a position where you have to defend, explain, or justify your behavior or actions. Each participant is required to complete an assessment based on the information received in this training. You must receive a score of 100 to receive credit for this module training. If you have questions about the information you received today, please refer to your campus principal. This concludes Module 1 of the Texas Ethics Training.